Row 14 on Flight 892 from Denver to Seattle was supposed to be the easy part of the trip. Emily Carter settled into seat 14A, the window seat she'd specifically selected 3 months in advance and paid extra for, with a small, soft-sided pet carrier tucked gently beneath the seat in front of her. Inside, a 10-week-old golden retriever puppy named Biscuit shifted sleepily, tired out from the long walk through the terminal. Emily had done everything right. She'd called the airline weeks ahead to confirm in-cabin pet policies. She'd purchased an airline-approved carrier. She'd printed Biscuit's health certificate and vaccination records and tucked them into the seat pocket, just in case anyone asked. She'd even arrived 3 hours early to make sure check-in for a pet in cabin went smoothly. Everything was going perfectly, until the woman assigned to seat 14B arrived. She stopped in the aisle, looked down at the carrier peeking out from under the seat, then looked at Emily with an expression somewhere between disgust and entitlement. "That's a dog," the woman said flatly, as if announcing breaking news. "In the window seat area. I specifically requested window seating for this flight. I get motion sickness, and I need to see the horizon, and now there's an animal blocking my view of the wing. This is unacceptable." Emily blinked. "I'm in the window seat. My dog is in an approved carrier under the seat in front of me. It's not blocking anything." The woman didn't budge. She raised her voice, loud enough that passengers 3 rows back turned to look. "I am not sitting next to a dog for 4 hours. Someone needs to move this animal, or move me to an actual window seat, right now." A flight attendant, already dealing with a full flight and a tight departure window, hurried over to see what the commotion was about. What started as one entitled passenger's demand for a puppy's assigned seat would spiral into something far bigger: mysterious complaints filed against Emily after the flight, vanishing paperwork, a hidden camera set up at her own apartment building, and a jaw-dropping public confrontation that would leave this woman regretting the moment she ever laid eyes on a sleeping 10-week-old puppy. This is that story. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we tell true-to-life stories about entitled people who think the rules don't apply to them, and we follow those stories all the way to their most satisfying possible ending. Today's story takes us 35,000 feet in the air, where one HOA president decides a 10-week-old puppy in an approved travel carrier is somehow the biggest inconvenience of her life, and follows her off the plane, into a smear campaign, a secret sabotage plot, and finally, a very public, very well-deserved karma moment. If you're an animal lover, a frequent flyer, or you just enjoy watching entitled people get exactly what's coming to them, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Before all the chaos, Emily Carter's life was refreshingly simple. She was 29, worked remotely as a graphic designer, and had just adopted Biscuit, a golden retriever puppy, from a rescue shelter 6 weeks earlier. The trip to Seattle wasn't a vacation, Emily was moving. Her company had approved a permanent remote transfer, and she'd spent the last 2 months carefully planning the move, finding a pet-friendly apartment, researching airline pet policies, and making sure Biscuit's first flight would be as smooth and stress-free as possible. She'd done her homework. In-cabin pet travel, when done properly, is a well-established, heavily regulated process. Airlines require an approved carrier that fits under the seat, proof of vaccinations, a small pet fee, and advance notice so the airline can account for the reduced number of pet slots allowed per flight. Emily had checked every single box. She'd even reached out to the airline's customer service team a week before her flight, just to confirm seating logistics, and was told clearly, passengers traveling with an in-cabin pet are permitted to select their assigned seat like any other passenger, and the pet carrier must remain stowed under the seat directly in front of them for the duration of the flight. Emily chose the window seat specifically because she'd read that window seats tend to have slightly more consistent legroom for stowing a carrier without it shifting into the aisle, and because she wanted to keep Biscuit calm and shielded from foot traffic during the flight. Everything about her preparation had been thoughtful, deliberate, and by the book. She had no idea that seat 14B was about to become the most chaotic 6 inches of legroom on the entire aircraft. Her name was Patricia Voss, and within the Cedarbrook Ridge Homeowners Association, she was known, depending on who you asked, as either incredibly dedicated or an absolute nightmare. Patricia had served as HOA president for 11 years, a tenure so long that most residents couldn't actually remember the last real election. She ran the community with an iron grip. She fined neighbors for holiday decorations left up 2 days past her personal deadline. She once demanded a family remove a wooden swing set because it was visible from the street at a slightly unflattering angle, and she had, on more than one occasion, sent a certified letter over a mailbox flag she deemed excessively shiny. Patricia also had a well-known habit of treating any public space as an extension of her personal authority. Restaurants, grocery stores, community pools. If Patricia didn't like something, she made sure everyone around her knew about it, usually at maximum volume, usually while threatening to speak to a manager, a supervisor, or, in more dramatic moments, corporate headquarters. She was flying to Seattle that day for a regional HOA leadership conference, an annual gathering where community association presidents traded tips on landscaping regulations and paint color enforcement. Patricia had specifically selected an aisle seat weeks earlier, later insisting to airline staff that she'd requested a window seat, despite her actual boarding pass clearly showing otherwise. When she boarded Flight 892 and saw an unassigned aisle seat 2 rows up, with a slightly better view angle toward the wing window across the aisle, she decided, without asking anyone, that seat 14A rightfully belonged to her instead of the woman with a sleeping puppy currently occupying it. To Patricia, rules were something other people followed. "I need this seat," Patricia announced, gesturing at 14A while Emily sat, quite obviously, already in it. "I get motion sickness. I need to see the horizon. You can move to my aisle seat, or better yet, that carrier can go in the overhead bin." "The FAA doesn't allow pet carriers in the overhead bin," the flight attendant, a calm and experienced woman named Renata, interjected gently. "In-cabin pets must remain under the seat for the duration of the flight. That's a federal safety regulation, not an airline preference." "Well, that's ridiculous," Patricia snapped. "I paid for this flight too. I shouldn't have to sit next to an animal." "Ma'am, dogs and other approved pets are permitted in the cabin under FAA and airline policy," Renata said patiently. "This passenger has all the required documentation, and her seat assignment is correct. If seating is a concern for you, I'm happy to check availability elsewhere on the aircraft." Patricia crossed her arms. "I don't want to move. I want her to move, or the dog to move, because clearly I was here first with legitimate priorities." A few passengers nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. One man across the aisle muttered just loud enough to be heard, "It's a puppy, lady, not a snake." Eventually, after several more minutes of arguing, and a very patient Renata checking the seat map twice, Patricia reluctantly took an available aisle seat 4 rows back, muttering under her breath the entire way, shooting glares back toward Emily for the rest of boarding. Emily assumed the confrontation was over. It was not. The flight itself went smoothly. Biscuit slept through most of it, occasionally letting out a soft puppy sigh that made the woman in 14C coo quietly and ask to peek at him during the descent. But 2 days after landing in Seattle, strange things started happening. Emily's new apartment complex, a small, pet-friendly building she'd specifically chosen for its welcoming policy toward dogs, received an anonymous formal complaint alleging that her puppy was aggressive, unvaccinated, and a danger to other residents, despite Biscuit being, at 10 weeks old, roughly the size and threat level of a stuffed animal. The complaint included oddly specific details: Biscuit's breed, approximate age, and even a mention of improper documentation used to smuggle an unvaccinated animal onto a commercial flight, a claim that was not only false but eerily specific to details Emily had never discussed publicly. Around the same time, Emily's online moving supply order, including a small crate, puppy pads, and a leash, mysteriously never arrived, despite tracking information showing it had been delivered to her building's front desk. When she checked the building's package log, it showed the item had been signed for, but not by her, and not by anyone on the building's staff. Then, strangest of all, a flyer began circulating in Emily's new apartment complex, stapled to community bulletin boards near the mailroom, warning residents about a resident harboring a potentially dangerous, unvaccinated dog, urging neighbors to report any incidents immediately. Emily, confused and increasingly unsettled, had no idea who would go to such lengths over a golden retriever puppy who could barely climb stairs yet. She had no way of knowing that Patricia Voss, furious over the flight, humiliated in front of an aircraft full of witnesses, and coincidentally attending her HOA conference just blocks from Emily's new building, had spotted Emily and Biscuit at a nearby dog park days later, recognized them instantly, and decided this was her opportunity for payback. Emily's apartment building took the complaint seriously. Building management had a strict no-tolerance policy for false reports, especially ones that could put a resident's pet at risk of removal. The building's property manager, a sharp, detail-oriented woman named Denise Okafor, decided to investigate properly before taking any action against Emily. She pulled the building's lobby and mailroom security footage from the days surrounding the missing package and the appearance of the flyers. At the same time, Emily, increasingly suspicious that this wasn't a random coincidence, mentioned the entire situation, including the flight confrontation, to a fellow dog owner at the local dog park, who happened to recognize the description of an aggressive woman demanding a window seat from a puppy, immediately. "Wait," the neighbor said, eyes widening. Older woman, silver bob, HOA lanyard practically glued to her chest. "I met her at a leadership meet and greet last week. She's staying at the Cedarview Suites 2 blocks from here for some conference." Denise, now aware of the possible connection, expanded the security review to include the building's exterior cameras and front entrance footage, cross-referencing timestamps from the missing package delivery and the flyer postings. They didn't have to dig long. The footage showed a woman matching Patricia's exact description: silver bob, oversized sunglasses, a laminated HOA conference badge still clipped to her blazer, entering the building lobby on 2 separate occasions, each time slipping past the front desk during a brief staffing gap, once carrying a stack of printed flyers, and once walking out holding a small package addressed to Emily Carter. Denise froze the footage, zoomed in on the badge clearly visible on Patricia's blazer, and shook her head in disbelief. "She's not just a random troll," Denise said. "She's been physically coming into this building to harass one of my residents." Denise compiled a full case file, the security footage showing Patricia entering the building on both occasions, timestamps matching the missing package and the flyer postings, and the oddly specific, factually incorrect complaint that had been filed anonymously but traced back to an IP address registered to the Cedarview Suites guest Wi-Fi network, the same hotel where Patricia's HOA conference badge indicated she was staying. Denise contacted building security and, given the severity of the harassment and the trespassing involved, looped in local police to file an official report. Emily, meanwhile, still stunned that someone would go to such extreme lengths over a boarding dispute involving a 10-week-old puppy, decided the story deserved a wider audience, not out of spite, but because she wanted other pet owners to know their rights when it came to legitimate, well-documented in-cabin pet travel. She posted a calm, factual account of the situation to a local Seattle community Facebook group, including a brief clip from the flight, recorded by another passenger and shared with her afterward, showing Patricia's original outburst at seat 14A, followed by a summary of the harassment that followed. The post spread quickly. And it didn't take long for someone in the comments to recognize Patricia Voss by name, tagging several members of the Cedarbrook Ridge HOA community, many of whom had been quietly documenting their own list of grievances against her for years. Denise arranged a meeting at the apartment building's leasing office, inviting Emily in, after building security formally identified her through hotel registration records tied to the conference. Patricia herself, under the pretense of resolving a resident complaint, a meeting Patricia reluctantly agreed to attend, likely assuming she still had the upper hand. She did not. When Patricia walked into the leasing office and saw Emily seated calmly beside Denise, along with a laptop open to the security footage, her confident expression faltered almost immediately. "I don't know what this is about," Patricia said quickly, "but I have nothing to do with whatever complaint was filed." Denise turned the laptop screen around. The footage played, Patricia entering the lobby, slipping past the front desk, posting flyers near the mailroom, and later walking out with a package addressed to Emily Carter. "You're on our security footage," Denise said evenly, "on 2 separate occasions, entering a residential building you have no authorization to access, distributing false and defamatory flyers about a resident's pet, and appearing to remove a delivered package that wasn't yours." Patricia's face went through several colors in rapid succession. "That is not what it looks like. I was simply—" "You were harassing a woman over a plain seat," Emily said quietly, cutting in for the first time. "My dog was in an approved carrier, under my seat, with all the correct paperwork. You didn't like that, so you followed me across the internet, into my new home, and tried to get my puppy taken away over lies." By this point, word had already spread through the building. A few curious neighbors, aware of the flyers and increasingly suspicious of Patricia's guest badge lingering around the lobby earlier that week, had gathered near the leasing office windows, phones quietly recording through the glass. "Wait, that's the window seat lady," one neighbor whispered loudly enough to be heard inside. "She followed a puppy here." Another added, laughing in disbelief, "She stole a package over a dog." Patricia, humiliated and cornered, grabbed her bag. "This is absolutely absurd. I'm leaving." "You're also going to be hearing from our legal team," Denise added calmly, "regarding trespassing and the false complaint filed against a resident." Patricia stormed out, but this time, there was no dramatic exit line, just the quiet, awkward shuffle of someone who knew, for the first time, that she had badly overplayed her hand. Patricia wasn't ready to accept defeat quite so easily. Back at the HOA leadership conference, she attempted damage control, spinning the story to colleagues as a misunderstanding involving an unruly dog owner. But word of the leasing office confrontation had already reached a few conference attendees, several of whom had connections to Cedarbrook Ridge residents and had, coincidentally, already heard plenty about Patricia's reputation as an overbearing, rule-obsessed HOA president. Determined to salvage her image, Patricia filed a formal complaint against the airline, claiming she had been traumatized by an aggressive dog on her flight and demanding a full refund plus compensation. She also filed a complaint against Emily's apartment building, alleging she had been falsely accused and threatening legal action of her own. Both complaints unraveled almost immediately. The airline reviewed their own onboard footage, captured briefly by a nearby passenger and voluntarily submitted after Emily's post went semi-viral, clearly showing Patricia, not Biscuit, as the source of the disturbance, with the puppy remaining calm, quiet, and fully contained the entire flight. The apartment building, meanwhile, forwarded their full security footage and police report to Patricia's own attorney, who, according to a source close to the HOA conference, quietly advised her to drop the matter entirely before it became a legal liability rather than a public relations one. Patricia's retaliation, instead of rescuing her reputation, had handed everyone involved even more evidence against her. The consequences arrived quickly, and from multiple directions at once. Emily's apartment building formally banned Patricia from the property, adding her to a no-trespass list after the security footage confirmed unauthorized entry on 2 separate occasions. The airline, after reviewing the footage from the flight and cross-referencing Patricia's own formal complaint against the actual recorded events, not only denied her refund request but flagged her account for a formal customer conduct review, citing disruptive behavior toward another passenger. Back home, news of the entire saga, the flight outburst, the building harassment, the failed retaliation attempts, reached the Cedarbrook Ridge community almost immediately, thanks to a few conference attendees who couldn't resist sharing the story. Combined with years of quiet resentment over Patricia's petty fines and selective rule enforcement, the HOA board finally had the final piece of evidence needed to act. An emergency board meeting was called. Patricia Voss, HOA president for 11 years, was formally removed by unanimous vote, closing out the same week her airline account was flagged and her name was added to an apartment building's permanent no-trespass list, all because of a 10-week-old golden retriever puppy who had done nothing more than sleep quietly through an entire cross-country flight. The woman who had spent over a decade demanding everyone else follow her rules had finally been forced to face a set of rules she couldn't talk, threaten, or bully her way around. In the weeks that followed, Emily settled comfortably into her new Seattle apartment, with Biscuit quickly becoming something of a neighborhood favorite, greeted by name at the building's front desk and adored by nearly every resident who passed him in the lobby. Denise Okafor used the incident to tighten the building's front desk and package security procedures, ensuring no unauthorized visitor could repeat what Patricia had done. She also personally apologized to Emily for the stress the false complaint had caused, though Emily, gracious as ever, insisted the building had handled everything exactly right once they investigated properly. The airline used Emily's experience, with her permission, as a training example for gate and cabin crew, reinforcing that in-cabin pet travel, when properly documented, is a passenger's right, not a courtesy to be challenged by another traveler's personal preference. Back in Cedarbrook Ridge, the newly elected HOA board reached out to residents for feedback on updating outdated, overly restrictive community rules, many of which had existed solely because Patricia insisted on them for over a decade. Several neighbors admitted they'd long suspected her authority had gone unchecked simply because no one had the full picture, or the courage, to challenge her directly. As for Patricia, her name became a quiet cautionary tale both within her own community and, thanks to Emily's original post, among an unexpectedly large audience of frequent flyers and pet owners online, many of whom shared their own stories of entitled passengers demanding seats, service animals, or special treatment they were never actually owed. At its core, this story isn't really about a plain seat, or even about a puppy. It's about what happens when someone convinces themselves that their personal preference outweighs another person's legitimate, documented right, and how far that entitlement can spiral when it's never been challenged before. Emily did everything correctly. She researched the rules, followed every requirement, and simply wanted a quiet flight with her new puppy. Patricia, meanwhile, escalated a minor inconvenience into weeks of harassment, false accusations, and retaliation, all because she was unwilling to accept no as an answer, a habit clearly built over more than a decade of getting her way at home. The lesson here is simple: just because you're used to bending rules in your favor doesn't mean the rest of the world owes you the same treatment. Real fairness means respecting boundaries, even when the boundary is as small as a puppy quietly sleeping under someone else's seat. Emily still flies with Biscuit regularly. He's a full-grown golden retriever now, well past the puppy carrier stage, but she still keeps a soft spot for window seats, and for the story of the one flight that taught an HOA president a lesson she clearly never expected. So here's what I want to know from you: have you ever dealt with an entitled passenger demanding your seat, or had someone go to ridiculous lengths over something as small as a pet, a bag, or a boarding pass? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of the stories you share genuinely deserve their own episode. If you enjoyed this one, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, fly safe, hold on to your window seat, and don't let the Karens near your puppy.